Hello and welcome back to political. It's political paradigms, isn't it? Am I going insane?
Wait, let me just look it up. Let me just look it up real quick.
We know what it is.
Yes, political paradigm. We're just basically that was a simulation of 2 takes ago where Toby genuinely forgot the name of the podcast.
I did. I thought I was going insane. It's Toby and it's Theo. It's been a couple of weeks. Theo's been traveling back to the continent. I've been doing a load of essays. We're aiming for weekly uploads. I suppose if there was mad news, it would be more than weekly, right? Like if the government starts collapsing, we'd probably have to hop on and do an emergency podcast. But
we'll always assess the situation and decide the frequency based on that. We'll never leave you guys in the dark.
The aim is weekly, generally where possible, I would say would be the policy. But who knows? Theo, we were in Parliament a couple of weeks ago. We went down, tried to get into Prime Minister's questions, hung around. What would you say your three highlights of our parliamentary visit were?
3 highlights of the parliamentary visit: waiting in line for PMQs and seeing that guy get ushered out because he was harassing the staff. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, there was actual beef between this, non-violent, but this member of the public was properly having a go at security. It was very odd.
Yeah, and what else? I'd say probably going to that pub. There's this pub near Parliament called the Red Lion, which is full of MPs and peers. So we went and hung out there. We really felt like, policy strategists working in Whitehall, having a couple pints at lunch. That would definitely be number 2. And then the third, probably Toby seeing his MP and being too scared to talk to him.
Yeah, Theo, this is, I'm going to let you say it. I'm not going to take it out. Theo is like, go on, ask him if he can get us in PMQs. Ask him. And the guy went past. And
I was so pushy about it.
Theo was like, for goodness sake, Toby won't talk to his MP.
Yeah. See, big barrier to democratic representation, an MP not coming off as welcoming enough to be spoken to. I mean, the system's broken.
I think, what was it you said? You turned to me and you went, they're literally there to represent you, Toby. Speak to them.
I think I did say that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So what were your 3 highlights of our trip to Parliament?
I enjoyed going into, is it Westminster Abbey? That was epic.
That was just Westminster Hall.
Westminster Hall. Shows how much I know. I won't make the gift shop a highlight, but an honourable mention to the really expensive Parliament themed wine you can buy in the gift shop.
They've got everything. They got wine, notebooks, cufflinks, whiskey, anything bougie you can think of that you'd give to your grandfather for Christmas or whatever.
The terrace was enjoyable. Us going around in suits, very enjoyable. And an honourable mention to the lobby, because we wanted to hang out in the lobby after PMQs and grab interviews. We couldn't because we're not lobbying, apparently. If you're not a lobbyist, you can't go in the lobby.
It tells you all you need to know. And let's face it, there are no actual influential lobbyists in this country who actually wait in central lobby to talk to MPs. I mean, come on.
They should have just let us hang there. No one else was there.
First of all, the people they want to lobby don't go through central lobby.
Yeah.
And secondly, the meetings almost definitely happen at expensive restaurants in London, not in Parliament.
If you're in the lobby, you're powerless. I'm sorry, but if you
yeah. It's a Potemkin village of parliamentary democracy.
Basically. But we are going to go back. I don't know exactly when, but is the plan next time we book in advance Prime Minister's questions and we'll...
Yes. You need 6 weeks notice. I thought 5 weeks would be enough. Apparently it's not. Yeah. So now we know and we'll be guaranteed to get in. So
we'll be going back. Do you think the goal for next time is at least get an interview? We won't leave until we receive at least one interview with someone.
Yes. And it will hopefully be your MP.
Andrew Jones, you know what? He probably would. So I'll drop him an email, be like, when we're down, can we interview you, please? What would you ask? What would you ask Harrogate and Nez for his very own MP, Andrew Jones?
I don't know. What's it like being the only, Tory within a 50-mile radius of where you live, the only Tory MP?
There's quite a few Tory MPs in North Yorkshire. It's much more Tory than you think.
But let's face it, like a kind of Tory constituency. I don't actually know what the mapping looks like, but I'd imagine it's quite isolated among a lot of red seats.
I think we're in quite a blue patch here,
Really?
Like Skipton nearby, very conservative, safe conservative. It's like when you head towards Leeds and York, yeah, it's like a sea of red. It's a sea of red. Anyway,
I guess what that highlights though is it's the kind of north-south divides people talk about are less prominent than just a simple urban-rural divide. That's always going to be the most significant.
This is very true. This is very, very true. So, on to politics. I think the first thing we want to cover at the top of the show is the thing that domestically has been the biggest political story. Rishi Sunak's AI conference. It is an example of, I mean, in terms of AI as a sector, the UK is genuinely world leading in terms of disproportionate to its size on the world stage. It's quite a coup for the Prime Minister to sort of have that event here. It doesn't look like they got a whole lot done more than what you'd expect, right? A joint statement of the different world powers, and it's mostly a talking shop. There was the interview with Elon Musk, which I'm sure we all have thoughts on. Theo, what stood out to you about all this? I saw a case made, I think it was Freddie Haywood in the New Statesman. I'm getting his name wrong. But he basically said, this is not going to help Sunak electorally, obviously. It looks like a prime minister who knows he's going to lose, who's looking for a legacy. Like, this is just, I like this, I'm going to do it, and hopefully this will be my legacy when I am defeated.
Yeah, that possibly. And I guess maybe if we can think of it from an electoral standpoint, perhaps he's thinking, well, people feel their jobs are threatened by AI. If I look like I'm taking it seriously, then maybe something good will come of that. I don't know. But his conference with his interview with Elon Musk was interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, and images of a, multi-millionaire prime minister with a billionaire wife, near billionaire wife, getting up and going, we need to be more comfortable with failing and abandoning a regular paycheck. I don't know if that does wonders for the Sunak out of touch narrative.
Yeah, for sure it doesn't. And also, then interview with a billionaire. I mean, it's a bit,
And he seemed like he was like a podcast host interviewing him. He didn't really it didn't feel like Sunak had the stature of a world leader. It felt like Elon Musk was the world leader in that.
It just tells you the amount of prestige our prime minister has at the moment among those in this country and among those on the world stage. I mean, Elon Musk is undoubtedly, more well known than Rishi Sunak,
and probably more influential. Probably more
influential in the economy. I'd say Elon Musk added more value to a sector in shoring up Dogecoin with his tweets a couple of years ago than Rishi Sunak has with all of his stimulus measures and whatever else he's done.
The sad truth of the world we live in right now. That's probably not too far off the mark.
This is the 2020s, guys. Get used to it.
Yeah, but interesting. And I suppose there are a couple of, in terms of science and things like that, this government seems to be, particularly under Sunak, interested in sort of breaking strides in certain areas. I know some bits of the science sector were very pleased with like a certain grant scheme they had going, and it's one of those things, I think, where it's interesting purely in terms of the policy, because the politics is kind of minimal. But we'll see what happens. I mean, do you think AI is going to have a role in sort of UK politics? Will it become an issue people think about in the years to come, do you think?
I mean, I'm not an AI doomer, but you can't deny it's going to start playing a role in the job market. And of course, the government's going to have to step in, if they carry on the path. Unless there's a complete revolution in government economic policy, they're going to, of course, play a role. It's going to have to be considered in policy. And it's probably going to only grow in importance as AI grows in importance and influence over the job market and people's lives.
Yeah, and I don't think the government either has the capacity to address it or is prepared to address the scale. I mean, Elon Musk was saying, like, people won't work anymore. He seemed to basically be advocating, like, I don't know if you've heard of the idea of like luxury communism, where like no one works. He seemed to be saying that, and then Rishi Sunak was just kind of nodding along, like, okay.
Yeah, and I remember him like saying like, oh well, a Tesla can chase you around and try and kill you, but it can't get through a doorway and it can't go upstairs, so you should be fine. And Rishi Sunak was just kind of awkwardly laughing.
Yeah,
I mean, because his Musk he was just presenting all the kind of dystopian potential realities of AI. Like what he said at the end, honestly, quite disturbed me. He said, an AI can also, be a friend for people. And then he talked about his son who has problems making friends and talks about AI as a solution to that. And then obviously putting Sunak on the spot with that, I found that just quite strange.
Yeah, I find all that rather unsettling. I guess maybe because we're, when all this is happening, we'll be like going, oh, I don't understand this new technology. But I do find that concerning to say that it doesn't sit well with me. I like people. I don't like the idea of like just interacting with robots. But I guess some people would be happy with that. On to the next story of the week, or the last couple of weeks. Obviously, the situation in the Middle East is very, very serious. We are not international commentators. We are not going to internationally commentate. We're only going to address this from the domestic UK political angle, which I must stress is the least important angle from which we can address it, frankly. What's happening in the Middle East, much more important in terms of human lives and suffering than, like, what it does to the polls in the UK. But this is just the angle we're addressing it from. It has seen initially Starmer and Sunak basically having identical positions. Starmer is starting to did a big set-piece speech, trying to come across very prime ministerial, seemed to be going a little bit more along the lines of a little bit more sympathetic to the plight of civilians in Gaza, saying maybe the government needs to do more. But both leaders very supportive of Israel and behind the Israeli government, more or less. Seem to be taking their cue from the US, basically, in terms of like what policy they'll follow. A lot of calls on the Labour backbenches, though, for a ceasefire. Some councillors have resigned. A couple of council leaders called on Starmer to resign. And there's more dissent in the Labour Party on this than there is in the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party is, 99% has a very pro-Israel position. The Labour Party, there are plenty of very pro-Israel MPs, and there are also plenty of MPs that are very critical of Israeli policies and extremely sympathetic to the plight of civilians in Gaza, saying that Keir Starmer needs to go further, hasn't done enough. I suppose the first question is, Theo, do you think this is something Keir Starmer needs to worry about, or do you think it's just noise in terms of his management of the party?
I think it's just noise. I mean, obviously this is unprecedented in the last few years in this region, but there's always ongoings abroad, in terms of geopolitics. And I can't think of a time where that's made a significant difference recently to, polling numbers or anything like that. Again, if we were to get involved in any way in that conflict, it would be behind the US at their discretion, in line with their policy. And it would probably be fully backed by Keir Starmer as well as Rishi Sunak. So it would essentially be everyone in UK politics, aside from, as you say, many in the Labour Party, backing, the US directive. So I can't really see it making any meaningful impact on the election cycle that we're going through, especially with, the kind of image we've been building up on the podcast over the last few weeks of, Rishi Sunak essentially just sleepwalking towards a sizable electoral defeat.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, if the government were to try and take advantage of it and go like, I don't know, what would they do? They could try and be like, oh, look, some people on a protest said something extreme, and these are people like loosely connected to Keir Starmer. And like, it would come across as really insensitive and crass. So they're not going to do that. And beyond that, I think it would be profoundly insensitive for either political party to try and gain political benefit from the situation. By the time it would be suitable to do so, the situation will be over. And I also think, there is one issue, right, which is Labour's electoral base has a lot of voters that feel strongly about this. You've got sort of younger progressive voters. We've also got a lot of Muslim voters. A lot of Labour MPs represent communities of Muslim voters that feel very strongly about the plight of civilians in Gaza, entirely justified in doing so, of course. But it does present, a certain section of Labour's base are critical of them. It's not enough to, swing an election result, but it does look to me like certain Labour seats could be at risk if there was like a third-party effort challenging Labour on this issue and sort of going, Labour's position isn't good enough. I think politically, for Starmer to move any more than he already has would make him come across as very weak. And I think that's what he's wanted to avoid doing. I don't know about you, Theo, but do you think there's just a thing of Labour leaders are always in trouble with their parliamentary party on foreign policy and they just ignore them anyway?
I mean, yeah, as you said, the Tories are a lot more cohesive with foreign policy, so they don't struggle with this as much. But absolutely. But I really don't think, again, there's much that could sway this. As you say, there's a large number of Muslim voters represented by Labour, but I think when it comes to them voting at the ballot box, a choice between Labour or Tory or splitting the Labour vote, I think, again, the decision is going to be pretty clear in light of to invoke our name, political paradigms that we've been seeing recently.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, you could damage Labour a little bit, take 2 or 3% off their vote. They're still 20 points ahead. Do you know what I mean? It's like they're so dominant right now.
And also with our electoral system, you only need 37% of the vote to get a majority, and 50% will get you, a huge, majority in Parliament.
The biggest danger I can see would be like the perception of Labour being that they're more divided because people think they're united at the moment in polling, and the perception of Labour being like, oh, they're weak, Keir Starmer's weak. But that's not enough for the Tories to win, but it could obviously make Keir Starmer sort of appear worse. No sign of that yet, though. Looking at the polling, you'd think, there's been a big international story. The Tories aren't as far behind as Labour on like foreign policy. They're kind of neck and neck on those kind of issues in polling. You'd think maybe the polls would be stable or maybe gone like a tiny bit towards the Conservatives. Right now, Labour have, according to an average of the polls, a 20-point lead. The other day, it was a 21-point lead. That's up from like a 17 or an 18-point lead. There has been a clear boost in both perceptions of Keir Starmer and perceptions of the Labour Party over the last few weeks. The only thing I can think of is conference. Do you think this is like the aftermath of party conference?
So you mean like a slight dip in the kind of honeymoon period after conference? Or?
Just like the overall bump is maybe like people have a more favourable view of Labour, more confidence in them after the conference?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to go back to like maybe a year ago, their appeal was, well, they're not the Tories after what the Tories have done. I think Keir Starmer slowly building up a prime ministerial image is very meticulously planned and very strategic. And this is exactly the outcome he wants to see, a gradual rise in the polls as he slowly builds a more charismatic, dominant image in the media. So yeah, I think it's very, very good indication that his plan is working.
Yeah, and I'm not seeing as much sort of, here's how Rishi can still win. It feels a little bit like the Tories have they're regrouping. I don't know if they quite know what to do heading into next year, particularly considering we've had like economic data out indicating we're probably going to have stagnant growth into 2025. So I don't really know what they've got to shout about.
No, yeah, I mean, I reiterate what I said on the last pod. The only thing that could shore up their polling at the moment, it would be some kind of crisis that they could respond to appear strong. And that always does help. But as we said, very unlikely. And also probably unlikely that they'd stage something to shore. I'm not suggesting they would do that, but again, that would probably be the only way.
Do you think also, that's a bit House of Cards, isn't it, that? I'm sure they did something like that in House of Cards. Yeah, I don't think Sunak is Frank Underwood, quite. Do you think that the sort of, as I'm sure you've seen, there's been like the COVID committee and all the testimony about sort of government incompetence during the pandemic. I suspect some of that may be flooding through. It's probably cutting through more than Labour divisions over Gaza are. So I'm wondering if the Tory brand is probably taking further punches from that. And the fact that Johnson is testifying and Sunak in December make me think that it's like another cycle of really bad headlines for the government.
I'm not too sure what Sunak's personal involvement in that was. I mean, I'm guessing, is it over Partygate or is it over their general kind of policy?
Over their general policy in the pandemic. And it does look like a lot of people very critical of Sunak, saying he was like very anti-lockdown. But even besides that, he's associated with the government that we're hearing a lot of people saying was like useless. That's like,
I mean, but I feel like the image the public have of their handling of COVID is firmly established, primarily because everyone suffered the consequences of it. So I don't think there's going to be any change to public opinion by the mere confirmation that everything they witnessed was in fact, the result of how the government handled it.
No, I suppose maybe it makes it marginally harder for people to cast a vote for the Conservatives, though. They'll see it and be like, no, sort of thing. Anyway, ahead in the week to come, do you know what we've got this coming week, Theo? I know I'm putting you on the spot. What big parliamentary event is happening?
Oh no, I give up.
It's the King's Speech.
Oh really?
The state opening of Parliament is happening on Tuesday. Tuesday the 5th? No, Tuesday the 7th. We're recording on the 5th. And it's the final session of Parliament before the general election. So any bills that they want to pass will all be in. And we'll get some... I don't know about you. Are you a BBC Parliament watcher?
Of course, raw footage straight from the room.
Yeah, we're getting Starmer and Sunak debating on the floor of the House of Commons on Tuesday. We'll get the... it's not the first King's Speech because he deputised for the Queen last time, I think, but it's the first...
Oh, right. But in his official role as King.
As King, state opening of Parliament, sitting with that... I don't know about you, but it looks awful how heavy that crown is when you have to wear it. I don't envy that.
That'll take some neck strength.
It really will. I'm sure the Queen did an interview once, the late Queen, saying like it actually does hurt your neck doing it.
Yeah. I'm honestly interested because obviously the late Queen was very well known for being politically impartial. Charles, the opposite. I'm wondering if he might take some initiative over this, especially in light of where the current government is headed. I mean, it's only a constitutional principle that the king doesn't, that the king reads the speech the government has given him. He actually has every right to say whatever he wants.
What you mean? You want him to
something we might look out for?
Think he'll rip it up and be like, vote Labour or something. What are you expecting, Theo?
Do a Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah. He reads out the speech and he rips it. That would be. Can you imagine the day
or even on a smaller level, just inserting his own thoughts into it.
It did feel a little bit like that in the Christmas message last year. He kept talking about public services and like how undervalued they are and stuff like that. And it was a little bit like, is this like it sounded a little Labour tinged, if you know what I mean.
Well, yeah. So
do you think we
should keep our ears peeled for that.
Do you think he's a Starmer supporter? Is that treasonous to speculate on this?
I think it is. I think you might end up in the Tower of London, Toby. Maybe we should digress.
Yeah, I think we should probably digress. I found that out in... one thing I did find out in Parliament this week is crossbenchers in the Lords, they are not allowed to give you any hint of their political leanings. They're very serious about that.
We may have heard something, though.
We know things that that are best left unsaid. But yeah, I think that's... Anything else you want to bring to the table, Theo, or do you think we've probably covered everything, right?
I think that is a good, coherent discussion of the recent ongoings.
Good. And I guess next week, or when you hear from us next, provided no more political crises, and nothing else changing in the polls, we will discuss what's happening with the King's Speech, what's happening in the upcoming budget, all that fun yet to come. Theo, thank you for joining me, and we'll speak again soon.
Thank you.